Okay, let's call to order the Planning Committee special meeting for July 10th, 2019. There is no Pledge of Allegiance for a special meeting. Public comment is open. Anyone in the audience wish to address this august body on any item not on today's agenda? Please come forward. Do we have any cards? Seeing none from Jackie, we will move on. There are no cards. Close the public comment. You have a comment?
No, I was going to move to accept the minutes of the last meeting.
We have a motion from Haskew, second from Abelson to accept the minutes. Any opposition? Seeing none, we are on to consent calendar. Anybody wish to pull any items? Seeing none. Do we have any cards to pull in? We have motion Romick, second Haskew. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? None. 13.1 is the release of the draft 2019 Congestion Management Program. Who has the staff report on this? Is that you, Matthew?
That would be me. Thank you, Chair and committee members. Great to see you tonight. I'm here to present the draft 2019 Congestion Management Program. The Congestion Management Program, or the CMP, is legislatively required. We are required to update it every 2 years, and we've done so since 1991. I give this spiel every time, and I'll do it again. The original legislation back in 1991 for the Congestion Management Program was based on our Growth Management Program from Measure C, which was a groundbreaking policy document at the time. And so many of the requirements of the Congestion Management Program are folded into our Growth Management Program. So we do defer to the GMP for many of the requirements of the CMP. And those 5 required components are that we establish level of service standards for a countywide roadway network. That includes highways and principal arterials. That we establish performance measures to evaluate the current and future multimodal performance of that system. That we prepare a capital improvement program that identifies projects that seek to maintain or improve the performance of the multimodal system. That we have a program to analyze the impacts of land use decisions on the regional transportation system. And that we have a travel demand element that promotes transportation alternatives to the single occupant vehicle. And the CMP must demonstrate consistency with the adopted RTP. And our 2017 Congestion Management Program coincided with the adoption of Plan Bay Area 2040, the 2017 RTP. So we did document that consistency in 2017. So the 2019 update of the CMP is basically a technical update where we focused on bringing it up to date with any changes since 2017. And we focused on a few chapters that required some updating. And that includes the performance element, where we document all the performance measures from our countywide transportation plan, our action plans, the regional transportation plan, our bike ped plan, and then those that our 5 transit providers use to measure their own performance. We focused on the 7-year CIP, the document that contains all the projects that are seeking funding over the next 7 years. So we did a call for projects in April and May, where all of the project sponsors from all the local jurisdictions and agencies updated their projects and added new ones. We focused on updating the level of service standards, and in that we discussed the passage of SB 743 and how that affects the CMP, as the CMP requires level of service, whereas SB 743 removes level of service from the CEQA equation. So there's some inconsistencies there that we document. And then we document changes to our model that have occurred and that we plan to take on over the next few years. And another significant component is the monitoring that we do at 65 intersections around the county. We do level of service monitoring at those locations, and we also collect bike and pedestrian counts. So we have a pretty robust bike and ped count database from this CMP process that doesn't require that, but we do it anyways and provide that to all of our local jurisdictions. So the CIP, the change from 2017 in 2017, it was worth about $16.5 billion. It's now up to $17.2 billion worth of projects. We developed a new database since the last time to allow our stakeholders to update via the web. And so we found some changes, not just in the dollar amount, but changes between projects in the two documents. So we're over the course of the draft CMP, we're going to do some real checks of the CIP and make sure that it's in shape, and we'll work with all of our project sponsors to make sure their projects that they want to be in there are actually in there. And so because most chapters have no substantive changes, we're proposing to publish the final document with just those updated chapters and then refer to the 2017 CMP for the remaining chapters. And that goes along with the authority's policy on reducing paper. And so staff's recommendation tonight is to forward the draft 2019 CMP to the authority board so they can release it to stakeholders and interested parties for review and comment. That comment period would go through October 1st, and adoption of the final CMP would occur in December of this year. That's my report. I can take any questions.
Questions of staff? Director Romick?
Something a little petty here on figures or maps 2.1, 2.2, 2.4, and 3.1. Oakley's Main Street is labeled as Brentwood Boulevard. Map 2.7 has it correct. I mean, it basically is right there between the border of Brentwood and Oakley, and Brentwood Boulevard's mostly, is shown as being mostly in Oakley. So I thought maybe we'd.
Taylor is the chair.
Noted.
So, but 2.7 has the correct map. It has the correct labeling on it.
I'm sure that'll get corrected before
Yeah.
it goes to full authority, if that's the motion. No other comments?
If there's nothing else, to move the item.
Motion,
Second.
Romick, second, Abelson, you got to be quicker. I would just say, one comment, all those in favor say aye. No opposition. When you get to the full authority, if it's just me, Chapter 5 includes two options, and I'd just like to be clear that if it's one or the other, or you can do both if you feel there's no staff members at the cities that are concerned about it, there's no need for me. Outside of that, we'll move to item 14.1, the proposed Contra Costa Transportation Authority Planning Section Work Plan for 1920. Who's got that? Matthew up again? No?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning at CCTA. And I just want to keep you briefed on the planning section's work plan for fiscal 1920, since it has gone through some changes based upon a series of seminars we had with all of the planning directors and transportation managers during the previous fiscal year 18-19. So we are working on the draft TEP, and we're supporting the possibility of having a new transportation expenditure plan go to the voters in March 2020. So the planning section and consultants are engaged in conducting a performance evaluation of the proposed initial draft transportation plan. I'm not going to cover those here, since all of the scope and budget and consultant support for that have been covered under the special TEP meetings of the authority. And so what I would like to discuss is, outside of the TEP effort, we are going to start working on some pretty challenging projects to kind of bring the growth management program into the third decade of the 21st century, given the changes in legislative setting. And the biggest legislative change that, as you all know, is we're leaving level of service A, B, C, D to describe congestion, and we're going to an impact measurement of vehicle miles traveled. So does the project generate new vehicle miles traveled or not? The fact that it might create congestion or lower level of service is no longer a significant environmental impact. So to address this change, we really need to reorganize the growth management implementation guide and incorporate those legislative changes and change the way that the local jurisdictions assess new projects in their general plans, new projects that generate more than 100 net new peak hour vehicle trips, which is the threshold we use. And that's going to require quite a bit of work. And we have a consultant on board, PlaceWorks, and they have approved budget to do that, with which to do this. We also heard loud and clear at the planning director seminars that our action plans and our routes of regional significance are too narrowly focused on roadways, and we should broaden the definition to include routes of regional significance, not only the highways only ones, which we've already been doing, but to include new routes such as trails and BART lines. And there's kind of broad consensus on doing that. And as we do that, we also want to change the way we measure success or measure performance. So we have these things called multimodal transportation service objectives in those action plans, and we're not only going to have to reorient those from level of service to vehicle miles traveled, but also deal with these new facilities, trails and BART and other possible facilities, and figure out how we measure their performance. And that would all go into a future action plan update. There are technological changes, the new ride-hailing services, the future will include some kind of automated vehicles at certain levels of penetration, and this whole concept of micro-mobility and, dockless bicycles and dockless scooters. So we want to bring those ideas were really not in our plans in the past, and we want to figure out how to account for them in the way we assess projects, the way we assess impacts, and the way we assess traffic. And then finally, there's our reporting system. You have 3 growth management checklists in your packet tonight, and they were done by the local jurisdiction filling out the form, taking it to their council. Council signs it. They submit a hard copy with a wet signature. We want to modernize that and go to a little less paper-heavy procedure, and hoping to get that up on the web and up on the cloud, and possibly use our new eBuilder software to work that process flow through. So that's the kind of the broad growth management program work that we're going to be doing. And to get that going, we're going to convene a group of local planners and engineers from the county and the cities and the towns, and they're going to serve on this new committee called the Growth Management Program Working Group. And we will begin to convene them. We've already got volunteers to serve on that group. And we'll bring up the ideas through TCC and to you as they come along. Good. As we develop the documents. The second part of this is implementing the 2018 countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. And you may recall when we approved the bicycle and pedestrian plan, one of our commissioners said it's too bicycle heavy and it should address pedestrians more. So we want to address that comment and respond. So one of the things we want to do is figure out what would it take if we were to address all of the pedestrian needs in Contra Costa. What would it take if we fixed every sidewalk, if we connected every trail link? And the bike ped plan does that really for the regional trails, but it doesn't do that for all the sidewalks. And it's, of course, a pretty big job to look at every sidewalk in Contra Costa. We don't plan on doing that. We plan on using typical examples of projects that could be done, and then figure out how many of them there are throughout the county. And that's the way that we did the Safe Routes to School Needs Assessment. We had some like 5 or 6 typical projects with set costs, and then we figured out what it would mean to implement that countywide. So we'd like to do the countywide ped bike assessment. We're going to develop a Vision Zero framework for pedestrians and bicycles, which Vision Zero is the goal that there will be, in the future, be no more pedestrian or bicycle injuries or fatalities. And there's best practices, design best practices for achieving that. So we want to get positioned to implement that. And then another item is, how do we deal with all the bicycles and the scooters that are being deployed, and how should a city respond to that? So
That's costing.
we want
Pick them all up, throw them in a pile.
Right.
Come
Right.
get your scooter. It's one of those
We
1,700.
want to kind of come up with a micro mobility response plan. How do we deal with the micro mobility revolution, and what's the best way to work with the startups that are providing these new services, hopefully in consultation with the local jurisdictions. And to do all of this, we need a significant amount of data collection, which is also part of the proposal. And this would be done through the Fair and Piers contract as an amendment to the Fair and Piers contract. And actually, in your consent calendar, there was an item to amend their agreement, and that's been approved by consent. And so we can proceed to the authority with this proposal. That concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of staff? Comment? We have a motion, Haskew. Second, Hudson. Oh, definitely.
All right.
You didn't see your light. I didn't want them to beat you to it.
Well,
We got to let people know we were here.
we do. So from a naive point of view, when we did the pedestrian and bicycle plan, the numbers were for accomplishing even just regional goals were astronomical. How do we gain anything by doing this other than discouraging people from even considering putting their arms around the problem if we add it to the local, add all the local needs that have to be done? If I've asked the question so everybody understands, anybody understands
But
it?
Martin will get it. I'm sorry. Are you trying to say we're talking about bikes now, or
All of it.
Okay.
The incorporation of the, we have a program in Oakley because we are sidewalk deficient in lots of parts
Yeah.
of it, of gap connection and whatever we call it, and that's kind of what we're looking at here. How do we include that in a budget that's already intimidating to begin with? How do we add the cost of this gap connection or whatever we want to call it into this, increasing the budget and making it even more intimidating than it already is?
Measure X? Go ahead, Martin.
So we can go about our business and not worry about it and not know what it costs. And they are astronomical figures. I think for Safe Routes to School, it was $1.5 billion. For the Ped Bike Low Stress Network, it was $1.5 billion. So that's $3 billion. And I wouldn't be surprised if the pedestrian needs came out to another $1 billion. So, pretty soon you're at $3-4 billion. You're talking about real money. $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
Everett.
And from a planning standpoint, it's good to know what it would take to keep the system in good repair. That's kind of a term we use a lot. But in this case, it'd be good to know what it would take to make the pedestrian system safe and to bring it towards our Vision Zero goals. And it's going to be what we call a financially unconstrained estimate. So we're not saying that we're going to fund it. We're saying we're going to figure out what it would cost. And then the funding from that, it does help to know because from the standpoint of advocating for funding, you can't really advocate unless you know what it costs. So we think it's a healthy exercise.
Commissioners, I want to add something to that because I think this is important. What Martin said is very important. We need to know the magnitude of the need in both from a pedestrian perspective as well as a bicycle perspective. But the other piece is when we're programming projects in the future and there happens to be a need, if we don't identify it, it's hard for us to capture that in the overall scope. So it's easier when we're doing a project study report to say, oh, and I'll use the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. So I was on vacation, and we were calling around to get information about what bicycle projects would be needed when it should be in the comprehensive countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan. That's one of the outputs. So then the cities and the towns in the county will focus more on making sure that they have a laundry list of needs in various corridors. And then when we program the 75 million along Interstate 580, we can capture the needs to make sure that at least we address those issues or scratch them off and say we're not going to program them. That's the time when we need a comprehensive list. Otherwise, they get overlooked. And then when the project's already scoped and it's in design and you add things to it, it's almost as bad as when you do it in construction. So it's better to program it in the planning process. And if we don't have a list, we can't do that.
Janet?
I was just going to say that my city is, in a way, an example of having dealt with that issue, but on the street side, because we were at the, I think we were 7th from the worst street condition in the entire
Oh, I think you were higher on that list.
county.
I think you
Not
were.
from the worst. We were even below that.
Yeah, Orenda and
Okay.
you were fighting it out in Contra Costa, that's for
in,
sure.
in the bottom. And so we went ahead and passed a measure, and then we kind of quantified what it would take, and it didn't take very long before we were in the top. I don't know if we were ever the number one top, but we were in the top 2 or 3. We may still be there. But if we didn't do that exercise, we wouldn't be able to do that. So the same thing I think applies to sidewalks and so forth. And my city is an example of lousy sidewalks, but they're really bad.
Try running on them.
But if you look at our neighbor, which is Albany, they actually passed, instead of a street measure, a sidewalk measure. And so it might be possible, but if we don't know how much it's going to cost, as Randy said, it's kind of hard to do any of that, and it's hard to plan for it. It's hard to include it in projects you're already doing. And so I think it's a great idea to do it. I don't know if that leads us to being ready.
That's a motion, Haskew, and a second, Abelson?
Not yet.
Yes.
I
Okay.
have one more.
I'm trying to get you in because you haven't been there. You've been beat out every time.
I know, thank you, and I appreciate it. The other question is, how much do we have to start from scratch? Because Walnut Creek has a bike plan and a ped plan.
Counts.
And how much can you use what's already existing?
So our plan is to be as efficient as possible and to talk to all the jurisdictions and find out what they have, and also at the regional and state and national level to look at what else has been done to efficiently make this estimate. As I said before, we're not going to ask every city to give us every single sidewalk project, because that actually is a very incomplete picture, and some cities may have a very good plan and some may have a very poor plan. So the approach is more bird's eye view of we can figure out how many linear feet of facility are out there. We can do that with geographic information system, but then just figure out kind of a typical level of repair that's needed, and do a more general estimate of the costs. And we're talking about an order of magnitude cost here. Is it $2 billion or $20 billion kind of a thing? So.
Got it. Are you ready for a motion?
We have a motion, Haskew, second, Abelson. Guys, turn off your lights, then I don't have to get in the way. I got cut out today. I would just say, when everybody's looking at examples, I think that What we're talking about on the Iron Horse Trail is a classic. We're starting to get trails where they want to be involved. We have East Bay Regional Park District wants to be involved. They're going to put out another flyer about how they're the answer to transportation. But when we looked at this overpass, we realized that where we're going, it doesn't work. And that's a lot of what you're saying. How do we get to where we're going? I will tell you right now, I'll make a prediction in the next 5-6 years. By the end of 2025, the amount of electric bikes, just say bikes because that's what they are, and scooters will triple the usage. And in conjunction with that, you're trying to do things like the autonomous vehicle that we have and shuttles, et cetera. So if you went and built a 10-foot wide, if we built what you have in Ignacio Valley over Bollinger, by the time we finish it, it's outdated. And I'm beginning to wonder if sidewalks are going to be a word of the past too. They're now little scooter transit bikeways or whatever it is. Other than that, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Seeing none. Other business? Do we have any? We adjourn to September 4th, 2019 at 6 p.m. Thanks for coming.